Thursday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. NBA trade deadline has come and gone. Cavs were not active during it. A little later in the show, though, we'll hear from Kobe Altman on why they stood pat. But we start with some news concerning the Browns and the Browns Stadium. So this coming out today, this is from NEO Transportation blog. Browns owners have a contract in place to buy 176 acres in Brook Park. It's adjacent to the airport. It is under contract. Again, the Browns did issue a statement. We've been clear on how complex future stadium planning can be. One certainty is our commitment to greatly improving our fan experience while creating transformative and lasting impact to benefit all of Northeast Ohio. We understood the magnitude of the opportunity with the stadium project, intent on driving more large upscale events to our region, and are methodically looking at every possibility. That's kind of one of the important things there. Magnitude of the opportunity with the intent of driving large-scale events to our region. What that kind of screams is that they're thinking of trying to get something with either a dome or a retractable dome that could, in fact, host larger-scale events. But again, nothing is set in stone. That is an option, though, as they look to find a way to upgrade the football stadium for the Browns. Let's get back to some news about the Browns coaching staff. So yesterday, Andy Dickerson named as the offensive line coach. Today, it is the assistant offensive line coach, Roy Estevan, who comes over from the Eagles. And again, this is kind of interesting. So Jake Burns, the guy that's been on the show from the Orange and Brown Report, talks about the evolution of the Browns offense to adding elements of McVay and Steichen to the offense, RPOs, motion between Ken Dorsey, Dickerson, Estevan. They do have a number of different styles that includes those motions. And again, Dickerson is from the McVay tree. You also have some of the guys from Steichen. So there is some of those elements that they could be incorporating. With that, let's welcome in Quincy Carrier, Untitled Unfiltered Browns Coverage. Quincy, when you look at that, how excited are you about not only Ken Dorsey, but Dickerson and what it might mean for this Browns offense?
I think it's a step in the right direction when you look at where Ken Dorsey's experience is. It's with those quarterbacks who play very similar to Deshaun Watson. So if you're trying to make him more comfortable, I think Ken Dorsey is an excellent hire. We know Deshaun is good friends with Cam Newton, so Cam can help him or give him some pointers there. But also it's just like, hey, it's a similar philosophy at the quarterback position, and that's really what we needed to change. And one of the things that kind of jumped out to me, I don't know if you saw the Stump Mitchell exit interview that he did, but he mentioned using Deshaun Watson just like Joe Flacco. And that was something where I was like, oh, I see why some moves needed to be made here, because if that was still a strong voice in that room, you got no chance of making the adaptations that you need to make. Because, I mean, like, come on now. Like, we all can see, like, Joe Flacco, Deshaun, they play different styles. But if you're that hard set on it, then I think that's an issue, right? And I think also Andy Dickerson, his stuff that he's done with run game coordination, we're going to bring this offense kind of closer to what other teams have done, teams that have given this Browns defense has done, defense issues have done. And also I think it's going to be better for the defense, right? Because we didn't get to practice against a lot of this stuff that Baltimore did or that Seattle did or even the Texans did, that really messed with the way that the Browns like to play defense. And now that they're going to be going up against some of that stuff every day, and then that's just going to be iron sharpening iron on both sides. I'm really encouraged. This, to me, feels like the changes that they made to the coaching staff last year, where it was like, no, these are very smart, very strategic hires that they're making to make this team better, not that they're scrambling around for solutions. It looks like there was a real plan, and they're executing that plan at a high level right now.
All right, this from ESPN, and it goes along with this. 3 biggest questions facing the Browns this offseason. Number 1, will Kevin Stefanski hand over play calling duties? Number 2, could the Browns chase a big-name wide receiver? Number 3, what will the Browns do in the draft? Start with the play calling duties. What do you think? You can hear and you can make the case that Dorsey is similar enough to Stefanski that he could hand over play calling duties. Do you think he will? Do you think he should?
No, he shouldn't. He's still going to be in charge of that offensive process, right? He's going to be the one that has the final say on what goes on the play sheet, what doesn't. And as long as that's his role, if he's overseeing the offense, if he's overseeing what goes on the play sheet, he should be the one calling the plays. The play caller should be the one in charge of the play sheet. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think play calling, we talk about it too much. It's overblown. It's overrated to me. I feel like if the play sheet is good, it don't matter who calling the plays, right? If the game plan's good, we're not worried about individual play calls because a lot of those plays that you schemed up during the week are going to work. It's only when the game planning is not good or you get outmaneuvered by other defense that we actually start to care about play calling because it's the only time it actually matters. Right. Outside of calling like a fake punt or something like that, like that's okay. That's on play calling, right? You call a fake punt, you do something, you YOLO it like that, you go for it when you're not supposed to. But that stuff's going to be up to Kevin anyways, regardless of who is calling the plays, right? If they're going to have to make a decision on 4th down, Kevin's making that decision regardless of who's calling plays. If they're going to make a decision on if they're going to go for it or kick a field goal, that's Kevin's decision to make as the head coach. And if they're going to make a decision to go call a fake punt, that's Kevin's decision to make as the head coach. So I think the play calling stuff can be overblown at times because it's a small part of a very large process that we focus on. And as long as Kev's the one in charge of that process, which he hired all of these coaches, which tells me he's the one in charge. He's the one who introduced Ken Dorsey as his offensive coordinator, helping him build the offense. As long as that's the case, Kevin should call the plays because he's in charge on that side of the ball. And who calls the plays is who's going to be seen as accountable for the offense.
All right, number 2, do you think they chase a big-name wide receiver?
Big name? It depends on what you mean by big name. Like, do you a wide receiver whose name you know? Yes, I think they will, right? Mike Williams, Hunter Renfrow, who else out there? Like, they're not going to go after like T. Higgins. They don't have the resources to do that because T's going to want a long-term deal. I don't think they can offer another long-term deal. They've given out so many over the last few years. I don't think they really have room for adding more long-term deals. But they could get somebody like a D-Hop on a short-term deal with the trade, or they could get somebody like Hunter Renfrow, who could become available because he's a cap casualty, or a Mike Williams, who could become available, who's a cap casualty. They will add a name you will know somewhere at wide receiver, more than likely, but I don't know if it's going to be somebody who's like when I think big names, I think of like a top 5 receiver in the league right now. I don't think they go out and get like Stephon Diggs or something like that.
And then we'll get in. You were at the Senior Bowl last week. We'll get into that a little bit later. What do you think they address in the draft?
I think they try to get some offensive line depth. I think that's where they really felt it the most this year, and where they're going to feel it going forward. You have to look. You have to ask yourself, is Wyatt Teller going to get another contract extension? I don't know the answer to that. You have to ask yourself, Ethan Pocic, new system away from Bill Callahan, will he be the same guy that he was only under Bill Callahan? That's a question you have to ask. I'm going to be prepared for it. The answer is no. Joe Bitonio, he's getting up there in age. He's been in the league over 10 years at this point. So, how much longer does he have as an active player? I mean, it was around this time where Joe Thomas decided to retire. I don't think it's far off for him. I think Jason Kelsey just retired too. So, he's getting older. He's getting up there. He's starting to have back problems. Like, these are real issues. So maybe, you have some questions at guard. You look at Jedrick Wills and you ask yourself, well, do you want to extend him, or do you want to have some options in case you don't want to extend him? So tackles on the board. Every single offensive line position, you can make an argument for being on the board for the Browns and being a significant thing that they're going to look for in the next couple of years. So I would expect the offensive line to be a really big focus focus and what they want to do. At other positions, they have some young players, right? Running back, they have some young players. As much as people are pressing wide receiver this offseason, they feel like they drafted 2 guys in the top 3 rounds of the draft the last couple of years, and David Bell and Cedric Tillman. So they might feel like those guys are still going to be on track to contribute. And I think that when you look at this roster, the offensive lines where you're like, hey, they need to do something about that or else it's going to be a problem in a year or two.
Quincy Carrier from Untitled, Unfiltered Browns Coverage, and I can step aside, take a quick time out. On the side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, talk a little bit more about free agency in the Browns roster. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
You might have expected all the games and all the excitement. And even though you couldn't see it right away, it's all right here. 5 games in 1. $22 million in prizes between $25 and $500, and a shot at $1 million grand prize. Golden Casino, a night's worth of excitement for just $10.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier, Untitled, Unfiltered Browns Coverage. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
You know, with the hire of Andy Dickerson, you know, you can see, like, the youthfulness that Kevin has gotten from offensive coordinator to running backs coach to tight ends coach. You can see there's a pattern here. There's, like, a youthful energy on this offense that I'm really starting to like because you have a lot of fresh ideas that can be brought in to the meeting rooms, and in my honest opinion, I think that Andy Dickerson should be the run game coordinator. If he got interviewed for an offensive coordinator spot, I don't think it's too far-fetched that he can be a run game coordinator and help with the run game.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Quincy, I don't think they're going to pigeonhole coaches into those kind of things. They're going to that just isn't the style of this coaching staff. All ideas will be welcome.
Yeah, they're looking to bring in new voices with different experience around the league, and do what a lot of other coaching staffs have done. I mean, this is it's a new place where we're at with this version of the Cleveland Browns, because when you keep a coach this long, these are some of the things that you have to do, where you have to kind of rotate in and out some guys to keep some new ideas coming in there. And this is just part of that process, right? Kevin's been here for 4 years. He's probably going to be here for a little bit longer than that, maybe even a lot longer than that. And the fact is that everybody else has had the same coaches in your division for the last 4 years as well. So if you want to compete, you got to do what they do and stay fresh and keep revamping and changing your ideas, like the Ravens were able to do last offseason with not only T.J. McDonald, but also by bringing in Todd Monken. They won the division. So that's something that the Browns always have to keep an eye on, always have to make sure that they're doing their best to be able to maintain where they're at and the continuity that they have.
All right, when you look at this Browns roster, who are some guys think could end up being cap casualties?
Jack Conklin's interesting because he has to be traded, right? You can't just cut him. He's owed guaranteed money. And I wonder if this is going to be a reverse Amari Cooper situation where the Browns just kind of say, hey, you want to get him, 5th round pick, 6th round pick, but as long as you eat most of the money, we're fine with it. Because I think that money is more useful for them in free agency than it is by just having Jack Conklin on the roster. Now, again, I don't know how they feel about DeJuan Jones. They might not be as confident in him as I am for next year, but I see no reason for them not to be confident in him. But DeJuan Jones is definitely somebody I look at. I know there are some names that pop up like Nick Chubb and Amari Cooper. Look, this team's trying to win right now, and I don't think that they feel like their chances to win are better if they switch out Amari Cooper for somebody else or if they switch out for Nick Chubb for somebody else. So I think they'll do what they have to do to make those numbers livable for them. But, yeah, when I look at this team, I think to myself, okay, this is a team that's definitely got to figure out what they want to do with Jack Conklin because he just doesn't make much sense for them anymore.
Yeah, and to your point, Amari Cooper is still far and away the most productive wide receiver. So you probably look to find a way to keep him a year additional and bring down the cap hit and those kind of things. All right, big name free agents. Who do you think the Browns could go after? And then give me a couple of under the radar ones as well.
So some big names that the Browns can go after. I think the biggest name that I think is kind of possible is Chris Jones. Could you imagine Chris Jones next to Myles Garrett? Now, there will be a debate who gets to wear number 95. Those are problems worth having if you could get Chris Jones on this roster next to Myles Garrett. That would be another big name would be like a Mike Evans. I think like that would be my perfect fit for what you want to do with this offense. You get a Mike Evans. Somebody else who might fly under the radar, maybe you get him on a cheap one-year deal, but he's a really big name. Tyron Smith is going to be available from Dallas, and he might be looking to go somewhere for a year or two, and the Browns might be a perfect fit. And, you know, if you have questions about Jed, especially coming off of an injury, you put Tyron at left tackle, you know that that's going to be solid for you for a couple of years. There are some under-the-radar guys that I think are going to be interesting for the Browns to look at. Guys like Devin Singletary, running back out of, well, he was Buffalo, but now he came out of Houston the last season. Justin Matabuke, if he doesn't get the big deal that he's expecting to get this offseason, he might want to be a one-year deal guy, and I think if he is, you want to get him. DJ Reader is also a guy who I felt like played excellent at that three-tech position for Cincinnati, and I think he'll be a perfect fit next to somebody like Dalvin Tomlinson, and I think you will really shore up your run defense with a guy like DJ Reader there as long as he can stay healthy. Gabe Davis might be another big guy that they're going after as well. So I think there's a number of guys. If you want to hear a crazy one, Saquon Barkley's available. You want to get crazy.
Yeah. Again, you can be sure Andrew Berry will be kicking the tires on a number of different guys trying to figure out what it would take to get those deals done. All right, well, all of the NFL awards, the postseason awards, will be announced tonight at the NFL Honors Dinners. Kevin Stefanski's up for Coach of the Year. Jim Schwartz is up for Assistant Coach of the Year. Joe Flacco's up for Comeback Player of the Year. And Myles Garrett, of course, is up for the Defensive Player of the Year. During his Super Bowl media availability, Cleveland Heights native Travis Kelce was asked about Garrett in that Defensive Player of the Year award.
I'm glad I didn't have to go up against him this year. He was on a terror, and it looks to be that he's found his groove in the NFL, and couldn't be happier for the city of Cleveland to have a guy like that because he's in the communities, he's making a difference, and he's in it for the right reasons. And Cleveland's lucky to have that guy. So good luck to Myles on trying to get that Defensive Player of the Year.
Quincy, it's going to be interesting. You know, the guys that voted on this. This is an AP award. Myles Garrett had the most votes by that Pro Bowl measure. So that should be a little bit of a telling sign. And you know Steelers fans are going to be screaming and Cowboys fans are going to be screaming if Myles Garrett does win the Defensive Player of the Year award.
Yeah, I mean, every winner has second and third place people who are going to be upset. It is what it is. Doesn't matter. We're not going to relitigate it in 10 years when we see that Myles Garrett won Defensive Player of the Year in his prime. Like, this is not a shock to anybody. Myles Garrett is a great player. If he gets that award, he 100% deserves it. And if T.J. Watt or Micah Parsons gets that award, I think they deserve it. These are three great players at the peak of their powers, playing at the same time, and you know sometimes they're just going to have to play some musical chairs with the Defensive Player of the Year award because they all can make an argument for deserving it. And I think that Myles is probably, you know, if this is down to him and TJ, I think they gave him the lead in votes, like you mentioned, in all pro voting. So it's only really if it comes down to him and Micah where this starts to matter, because I don't think they're listed at the same position. I think they still list Micah as a linebacker.
Yep. So we'll see. Again, we'll know for sure tomorrow. It's tonight at the NFL Honors Dinner out in Las Vegas. Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take another timeout, other side of the break. We'll talk a little bit to Quincy about some names to listen out for from the Senior Bowl. He was in Mobile last week for practices in the game. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Try C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. This from Maurice Jones-Drew from NFL.com. Ranked every starting running back from the 2023 season. And the Browns running backs did not fare well. Jerome Ford was ranked 24th. 37th was Kareem Hunt, and 45th was Nick Chubb. Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt did enough to help the Browns earn a playoff berth. However, there's a reason the offense turned into a pass-first unit once Chubb went down, despite the fact that the Browns started 4 quarterbacks throughout the season. Chubb is elite, averaged 5.3 yards per carry for his career, second highest for a running back in NFL history, behind only Jamal Charles, who is at 5.4. Quincy, Ford had some moments, but the problem was, I think it was 16% of his carries went for negative yardage, and that you just can't do that. It's almost like a yard and a half, a 2-yard penalty, because you're looking at you're behind the sticks, if you will.
Yeah, Jerome Ford, at this point of his career, he's not somebody who you want to be an every down back, and he's just not big enough. I think part of the reason he gets taken down behind the line of scrimmage is because he's a good 10, 15 pounds lighter than a Kareem Hunt and significantly lighter than Nick Chubb. So he's a lot easier to tackle, and he likes to bounce outside to the edge a lot, like you see Nick Chubb do. But Nick Chubb doesn't get taken down behind the line of scrimmage because he's a giant. Jerome Ford is not, so I think that's his big thing. He's a home run hitter, but he's got to grow into his play style, and physically he hasn't grown into his play style yet. So that's really, I think, Jerome Ford's biggest issue. And the question is, is he going to grow into his play style? Because it's not like he's in his first year in the league. This is his 3rd year, so that's a huge question for him. Kareem Hunt, thought he did great in short yardage. Shout out to all my spring football lovers, but he had a pretty Trent Richardson for the Alabama Birmingham, the Alabama Iron type season where Trent Richardson had 12 touchdowns in half a season there, but 300 yards. And that's kind of what Kareem Hunt was doing, really short yardage type stuff. And we know Nick Chubb's elite. We know Nick Chubb's one of the best running backs in the NFL. And when he gets back healthy, the rest of the league's in trouble, because I think he's one of those guys like an Adrian Peterson that you expect to come back from an injury like this and play at a high level.
All right, you were in Mobile for Senior Bowl for the festivities. Who are some names that the Browns should listen out for that impressed you?
Roger Rosengarten, tackle out of Washington. Now, he played right tackle at Washington. You have to remember, though, they had a left-handed quarterback, so he was a blindside protector, kind of similar to Jed Wills, where Jed played right tackle at Alabama, but he was the blindside protector for Tua Tagovailoa, who was a left-handed quarterback. Same thing's true for Michael Penix. So he was the blindside protector for Washington. Did a good job at that almost all year. Had some trouble with Michigan in the championship game. Came to the Senior Bowl and pretty much dominated almost every rep he touched. Good athlete, finishes plays, great motor on him. I think he's the real deal. Good length, good strength, hand placement, technique. I know he was mocked as a 4th or 5th round guy coming into the Senior Bowl. I'm telling you right now, that's not a 4th or 5th round draft pick. That is a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick. And honestly, if you get him in the 3rd round, you're ecstatic. Good athlete, good size, built just like Joe Thomas. Not saying he plays like Joe Thomas. Joe Thomas was one of the best offensive line prospects ever, super refined. He's not that at all, but he's built similarly to Joe Thomas, which is kind of the ideal left tackle build. We saw him flip both sides at the Senior Bowl, play right and left. I thought he did an excellent job on both sides of it. He seems like a good enough athlete, and I'm gonna be honest with you, if he runs a 5 flat or under a 5 flat at the combine, he might sneak into the 1st round. But yeah, Roger Rosengarten, I think if I had to name one player from the Senior Bowl, that's one that I walked away from thinking, man, that dude, he should be in Brown.
What about a wide receiver? Give us some wide receiver names that you were impressed with. I know you were watching them as well.
I thought Leggett was pretty interesting. He's not as tall as you would have expected. There was something funky going on with them South Carolina depth charts because like everybody was undersized that was in South Carolina when they measured. But I think he was supposed to be listed at like 6'4". He came in at like 6'1", 6'2". I think my guy Kyron Samuels gave a really good comp for him. He said that he reminds him of Dez Bryant, and that's kind of the receiver that he is. He might be something interesting for the Browns. He's a 50-50 go-get-him guy. He doesn't separate great, but I'm not super tied to how well a player separates because I think getting open is its own skill and it's not necessarily tied to speed. And he gets open and he can catch through contact. And those are the things that I really care about at the receiver position. So if I had to point out somebody who had a good week there, I mean, obviously Roman Wilson had a good week. You guys heard about that. Ladd McConkey, really good wide receiver as well. Don't know where you put him if you draft him if you're the Browns, but he'll fit somewhere. He'll be a good player. He's just good at football, right? Like he's just one of those guys who's good at football. I think there are some interesting guys at wide receiver, but if you're looking for that size combo for the Browns, you want a bigger wide receiver, I think Leggett's probably a good bet for you too.
All right, let's take a look at this. This is from Next Gen Stats. Highest defensive success rate on blitzes in 2023. Browns were best in the league, better than 70%. Second was the Colts, 63.9. Chiefs, third at over 62%. Raiders also over 62%. And the Jets finished fifth. Again, it's a little bit surprising because I guess you didn't. It wasn't like Jim Schwartz blitzed a ton, but when he did, it worked.
That's a Myles Garrett stat. And not to say that every time you blitz Myles Garrett, he gets home 70% of the time. But when you do blitz and you have Myles Garrett and teams are focused 3 to 2 guys at least on Myles Garrett, when you blitz and you send an extra guy, it's real easy to get home or to get pressure because all that attention is going to Myles Garrett. See, when we focus so much on sacks, that kind of stuff, that's the stuff where it's like, yeah, you're that because Myles. You're 7 points above, 6 points, my bad. 6 points above number 2. That's because Myles Garrett's out there. It don't even matter if Myles Garrett was being productive or not in those snaps. It's just the fact that he exists drew all of that attention to him. So when you send an extra guy or you send a DB off the edge or you get like, Grant Delpit or somebody like that, and I think this is why it's not that surprising to me because a lot of the Browns sack numbers are spread out from linebackers and secondary players as well. So, when you send that extra guy, it's real easy to get home and get pressure because they're so worried about 95. They can't adjust to everything else that's going on, especially if it's happening on the same side where 95 is.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, some potential trade targets for the Browns. Sports4CLE, I'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. 4 potential trade targets for the Browns in the offseason. This from Dog Pound Daily. Number 4, wide receiver Jerry Jeudy from the Broncos. They were talk about him up at the trade deadline. Number 3, a guy we've talked a little bit about, Mike Williams, wide receiver for the Chargers. Number 2, they go with Joey Bosa, edge rusher from the Chargers. And number 1, Devontae Adams, wide receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders. All right, let's do the 3 wide receivers together. Quincy, I don't know that, and it's nothing against Jerry Jeudy. I think they got Elijah Moore that's a similar style. I'm more intrigued by Mike Williams or Devontae Adams. Just your thoughts.
I mean, let's call it what it is. We're just tired of guys who are hypothetically productive, right? Like, hey, man, they could be productive. We just want somebody who's actually productive because those are wide receivers that tend to work out. We've been talking about the ideal of Jerry Jeudy, but the reality of Jerry Jeudy has been very disappointing as a wide receiver in Denver. Mike Williams, we've seen him produce. We've seen him kill the Cleveland Browns a couple of times. Devontae Adams, his production doesn't even need to be explained. So, yeah, I think those would be more appealing to people because, the Browns are at a point to where they're not trying to develop a talent to be another wide receiver for them. They just need somebody to step in and produce. And when that's the case, you want to go with somebody who can produce because they've done it before, and that's Devontae Adams and Mike Williams. Obviously, Devontae Adams a bit higher tier than Mike Williams. He's not coming off an injury or anything like that. But, yeah, like those two guys would probably be more attractive to a lot of Browns fans because I think a lot of Browns fans are burnt out on betting on the ideal of certain wide receivers, right? We did it with Anthony Schwartz. We've done it with a couple of rookies, and then we did it with Elijah Moore. And I think people just want the productive wide receiver, instead of the one that could be productive down the line if he's just patient enough.
When you look at Mike Williams, that might be a guy that they're ready to move on for. They got the young guy, Johnston from TCU that they drafted, Quentin Johnston. You still have Keenan Allen. So that's certainly possible, I would imagine, from the Chargers standpoint. Jim Harbaugh, you got a new head coach, new offensive staff.
Mike Williams is going to be available. Like, I'm pretty sure of it, right? He has a $30 million cap hit that they're not going to want to go up against, and he just got a ACL injury, and I think he's turning close to 28 to 30 or something like that. So, yeah, they're going to move on from him. You can either get him as a cap casualty or you can get him as a trade. I don't think it would be that expensive either way because he's going to be on in 1 year prove it deal world. So of all of these names, Mike Williams is the most attainable as well because he's going to have to be on a prove it deal. And that's the kind of deals that the Browns can give out right now. Short-term, quick deals to these guys. And I think Mike Williams also has a ton of experience with Deshaun Watson, won a national championship with them in Clemson. So he knows how to adjust to his play style. And I think, if we want to add familiarity for Deshaun Watson, it's not just about the offensive concepts you run. It's about some of the personnel as well.
All right. Last year, Andrew Berry put a ton of money and successfully with the defense. Do you see him doing that to the offensive side of the ball? You've got a new staff. You're trying to surround Deshaun Watson and maximize him. Do you think Andrew Berry puts a bunch of resources into improving the offense this year?
I don't think the offense is as bad or as bad as a place as the defense was a couple of years ago, right? Like, I think that's something that deserves to be said. The reason the offense was a little underwhelming this year is because everybody got hurt. Like 26% of the salary cap on IR, and I think 95% of it was on the offensive side of the ball. So that is part of the reason you had some issues. Another part of the reason you had some issues was just because, you were a little behind the eight ball with some of the stuff that you were trying to run offensively. So I think the big changes for the offense are going to mainly be with the coaching staff and some of the backdoor stuff, because I think that's what really needed to change. But personnel-wise, once you get everybody back healthy, you want to add some bodies on the offensive line for sure, maybe add another wide receiver, but you're still talking about an offense that has a number one running back in Nick Chubb. You're still talking about an offense that has one of the best tight ends in football in David Njoku, and you still have one of the better wide receivers in football in Amari Cooper. You're talking about adding supporting pieces around what you already have, which are main pieces at every level, and you hope that Deshaun Watson can be somebody who's on that caliber as well. So, yeah, they're going to add some pieces, but this isn't going to be like we're trying to add all of the big pieces together like on the defense. I think it's going to be just, hey, we need to get some connective tissue on this offense to help get everything together.
All right, before I let you go, I know you've addressed this on your show. Do you think the Browns can win the Super Bowl next season? And if so, what needs to happen?
If they get this offense, because I think that, look, the defense isn't going to – they might give you better numbers than they did last year, but let's just assume for sanity's sake that they are slightly like just as good as they were this year. If you get an offense that can really be more explosive and be closer to top 10, you have everything you need to win a championship. You have reliable special teams, you have a great defense, and you have a good offense. I mean, that's literally everything you need to battle with the best of them. And look at how the Browns did when they did battle with the best of them this year, right? When they beat Baltimore and they beat San Francisco, they didn't play Kansas City, but I feel like they could have beat Kansas City this year too if they played them in the regular season. Now, playing somebody in the regular season and in the postseason are two different things. Not going to pretend like that's the same thing, but they have the tools to be able to do it. They have the weapons to be able to do it, and if they can get the offense on that level, then they're quite literally one of the best teams in the NFL. We all thought after that Baltimore game that this was a Super Bowl contender. Then Deshaun Watson got hurt for the rest of the year, and we had to try to salvage what was left of the rest of the season. And I think that there's no reason that this team shouldn't be even better than they were last year.
And to your point, it isn't like you need Watson to be superhuman. You need good quarterback play from him.
Yeah, you need him to be smart, to know when to take some chances, when not to. He's still capable of doing it. We saw some of those beautiful passes that he's capable of during the season when he was healthy, albeit a small sample size of it. We saw him still be able to do stuff with his legs, play smart football. This team was plus 63 in point differential when Deshaun Watson was out there. I think the second highest they had was Joe Flacco during the regular season, who was plus 20. Obviously, the blowout in the playoffs got him back in the negatives, but that's who you were. And you know who else was plus 63 in point differential around that time? Kansas City Chiefs. And they're in the Super Bowl, right? So you're right up there with those teams, and I expect the offense to get better. Deshaun Watson, if he can just get 8 consecutive games together, I think he'll look fine. He'll look pretty good at quarterback. And if you can get that going, you get the health going, and you get obviously the things that you need to go your way in order to win a Super Bowl. I see no reason why this team isn't capable of doing that and competing at a very high level.
Quincy Carrier, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
No problem. Thank you, Dave.
Quincy Carrier, make sure you check him out. Untitled, unfiltered Browns coverage. Always really good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. We will hear from Kobe Altman why the Cavs stood pat on trade deadline day. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back talking Cavs.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. Trade deadline in the NBA came and went about an hour or so ago. Cavaliers stood pat. There was some talk that they were talking about Royce O'Neal and some other guys, but Kobe Altman talked about standing pat and what the ceiling for this year's Cavaliers team is.
Darius Garland and Evan Mobley, if you want to call that our trade deadline acquisitions, are pretty good. There's going to be some time to reacclimate them once we get off the minute restrictions. And so already thinking about those challenges is a lot when you're adding that level of talent to a team that's been playing so well. So thinking about adding another addition to that, finding a successful path and minutes for an addition, just didn't seem like the right thing to do at this point in time, especially with how we've been playing. But we do think that we have the talent level to compete with the best. I think we've shown that we had, this year and last year, was able to compete with the best teams in the league. And we're doing that now. We're still young. Obviously, playoff experience is something that we need to add to this group. And go further, past first round or rounds of the playoffs. Those are really hard. The NBA is really difficult. The parity is difficult, but we feel we're right in the mix of some of the best teams in the world right now, and we're going to continue to compete for that.
So some of the other teams near the upper echelon in that Eastern Conference were active via trade. But the locker room of the Cavs was very vocal that they felt they had the right pieces in place. So Altman did listen to the locker room. He talked about that, as well as looking into the veteran buyout market coming up in the next few weeks.
The sentiment from the guys are meaningful to me. And when they're saying we have enough, and when they're saying that, we're excited about the group that we have, that's meaningful to me. Outside of our projections, outside of how we forecast from 2 to 3 years down the road, this group is really locked into the present and how we continue to get better. And so I'm good with that. And we can't control everything that's going on around us. The bulk of our work was done in the offseason. I think we will certainly, monitor the buyout market. Is there a depth piece in there to help? It has to be a character fit as well. The one thing that I really love about this group is they genuinely do love each other, love playing for each other and for the city. And so you don't want to mess with that.
Kobe Altman talking about the buyout market and the chemistry. All right, the Cavs will have their second of a road back-to-back tonight. They'll be in Brooklyn facing the Nets. And the Nets did trade a couple of their players. They traded Spencer Dinwiddie and Royce O'Neal, who the Cavs were somewhat interested in. So Cavs will face them a little shorthanded. But the Cavs, this is the road record for the NBA. Best road record in the NBA. Usually a sign of a good team is that they can win on the road. Cavs are the best in the NBA, a half a game better than the Celtics. You see the Thunder, Suns, Timberwolves, Mavericks, and Clippers all considered to be somewhat contenders. Those are the best road records in the NBA rather, and the Cavs have the best at 15-8 facing the Nets tonight. The addition the Cavs made in the offseason were aimed at improving not only the outside shooting but the floor spacing, so that guys that drive to the lane and work inside can be effective, and this shows you it's pretty good. The floor spacing and the shooting. Cavs have now hit 12-plus three-pointers, franchise best 17 consecutive games since January 1st. So again, the Cavs identified a need, went after it, and were very successful in what they did. The other thing is they're coming off that win against the Wizards last night, and Donovan Mitchell showed up huge. So, again, last night, Donovan Mitchell against the Wizards, 40 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, 14 of 25 from the field, 5 of 10 from three-point range, perfect on 7 free throws. It's his 5th 40-point game of the season, and his 18th 40-point game as a Cavalier. That is the second most in franchise history. It's second most behind a guy named LeBron James. It's also his 27th 40-point game of his NBA career. And the Cavs have been on a hot streak, winning 16 of their last 17, and it's in large part because Donovan Mitchell. When the Cavs lost Darius Garland and Evan Mobley, Donovan Mitchell was the guy that took over with the ball in his hand. He's been a guy that's not only kept up that scoring pace at 27, 28 points a game, he's been a guy that's been facilitating the offense, getting other guys to hit those open shots and those three-point shots. So Donovan Mitchell, he should be an NBA All-Star starter. Kobe Altman has been very effusive in his praise for him, said without question he's been one of the best players in the NBA this year. Anybody that's been watching the Cavs during this last run would not argue, would agree wholeheartedly. Donovan Mitchell has been better than advertised, and he was supposed to be pretty good to begin with. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. We turn our attention to the Cleveland Guardians in Major League Baseball. Hard to believe. Spring training right around the corner. Guardians will have their first workout coming up next Thursday. Pitchers and catchers will have their first workout Thursday down in Arizona. Anthony Castrovince, MLB.com's national baseball writer, Cleveland native, will join us. We're talking Guardians on the other side of the break. Stay with us on Sports4CLE.
You might have expected all the games and all the excitement. And even though you couldn't see it right away, it's all right here. 5 games in one. $22 million in prizes between $25 and $500, and a shot at $1 million grand prize. Golden Casino, a night's worth of excitement for just $10.
We continue talking sports here on Sports4CLE. We turn our attention to the Cleveland Guardians. Next week, pitchers and catchers will have their first workout out in Arizona. Let's welcome in Anthony Castrovince. He is MLB.com contributor for all of baseball, a Clevelander, a Guardians fan. Anthony, when we look at this, not much movement relative to the roster from the Guardians. What are you hearing? Just your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's been a slow-moving winter across MLB. The Dodgers have certainly made a lot of noise, and there's been some other big names to move, but there's still a lot of meat on the bone in free agency. For what this class was. The Cody Bellingers of the world, Blake Snell, reigning Cy Young winner, Jordan Montgomery from the World Series champion Rangers. All these guys are still out there as you said. Camps open next week, so it's been an odd winter in terms of the timing of things, and things have been really spaced out and slow paced. And then you have teams like the Guardians that just really haven't done much of anything. I think the regional TV situation with Valley Sports, Diamond, that played a role in that, and that's only been resolved on the Guardians' end in the last few days. So that plays a part, and it sounds like they're going to be taking a haircut in terms of their right fees. So I'm sure that takes, that affects the player payroll, I would imagine. So, I think it's those two factors, just kind of the industry at large and the TV factor, have led to an especially slow offseason here in Cleveland.
Yeah, and it seems like every year we talk about the disparity between what the top end teams are spending and the bottom teams. And now let's take a look, even in the division, the Central Division, which isn't, it's not the big market division. There's still a huge disparity between the payroll of, the White Sox. Yeah, the Twins are up there, and then it's, the Royals, the Tigers, and the Guardians. So you see the rankings, Guardians 28th out of 30. Average payroll for the division is $119 million, and that would rank 21st. So it's and yet the people that argue on the flip side of it is they'll tell you, well, every year somebody that's one of those middle to low level payrolls ends up advancing deep in the playoffs. But it's almost like it's an anomaly. It's not like something you can count on every year.
You can count on it happening every year. It's just it's hard to count on being that team, year in and year out, to spend a low amount and to contend year after year. The Guardians, of course, won their division 2 years ago with one of the lowest payrolls in MLB because they had the youngest team in MLB, and they'll have one of the youngest teams again here in 2024. And obviously, youth generally leads to lower contracts. So then it's a matter of how good is your youth, first and foremost, and then what do you do to support it along the way? The Baltimore Orioles have been the lowest spending team over the last 5 years or so in MLB. You take it on measure, they probably spent less than anybody, and now they're starting to add to that, where they acquire a Corbin Burns to go with their great young core. That's the way it's supposed to be done. Is you eventually support that young core with some established talent that costs a little more. The Guardians haven't done that yet, and they're still in feeling it out mode. It feels like, it seems. It's clear after the way last season went off the rails. They're still trying to figure out what they have on their major league roster with these young guys, and so payroll isn't everything. We know that. The Mets were the biggest spending team in baseball last year and fell flat on their face. Those things can happen, and then you can have a team that like the Diamondbacks that comes from the lower third in payroll and goes to the World Series. Those things do happen, but you're right. You have to, at some point. It's great. You build a young, cheap core, and then you build around it, and you extend guys and all those sorts of things. So they extended Jose Ramirez, but they obviously haven't done much to to augment the young core in free agency. We haven't seen anything really.
Yeah, and you can understand Guardians fans kind of getting a little antsy and being frustrated with that. The one thing is, you look at this rotation, and it's pretty good. You go Bieber, McKenzie, Williams, Bybee, Logan Allen. Those are really good. Now, the last three guys made their major league debuts and had great success. So, if you're a Guardians fan, you have to be concerned at some point the league kind of adjusts or figures out one or two of those guys, and there's a little bit of regression. The thing I find really interesting is the past several years, the Guardians always had 6 or 7 guys that you thought, man, if you have to rely on him to start 15, 20 games, you're okay. I don't know that, with Quantrill leaving, with Cody Morris leaving, trading Savale, I don't know that you have that buffer that's been so important.
Yeah, you hit it. And, those guys have moved on without, offsetting that, I guess, with more stability in the lineup. It'd be one thing if that was the case, like if you traded a Shane Bieber and got back, a major league piece. But obviously they've kept Bieber, and I think it's probably important to keep Bieber, given the factors you just mentioned, where you don't know with young pitching, what sophomore steps will have to be taken, and will injury rear its ugly head, and those sort of things. And yeah, there's questions about the depth, and they'll need more than 5. Every team does. Youth is on their side in terms of just general durability and pliability, but you also have to be careful with those guys' innings. So, there are some other names beyond what you showed there. There's the Hunter Gaddis, Xavier Curry. Those guys could fill in a pinch. Joey Cantillo is a higher end prospect for them, who could be potentially a major league option this year in the rotation. Daniel Espino was a top pitching prospect. Obviously, injuries got in the way for him last year, so. It's hard to count on him being a guy who steps up and steps into the rotation at the major league level this year. But there'll always be surprises that come from the system. But you're right. I mean, you go into spring training with a different depth picture than we're accustomed to seeing here in Cleveland. And, it's not offset by some commanding lineup presence. We still have all the questions we had about the lineup that we had at the end of last season.
How good, relative, you cover all of Major League Baseball. How good is that Guardians starting rotation relative to the rest of the league, do you think?
It's interesting. I haven't poured over projections and stuff yet I do rankings every year of the rotations. They usually end up wrong, as most baseball predictions do. So I don't know. I don't know if that would. I don't know that I would have them as like a top 10 at this point. I mean, they'd probably be on the fringe of that. I think, just off the top of my head, without looking at it too deeply at this point. But the upside is tremendous there, because you can play the devil's advocate with Logan, Bybee, and Allen as the league adjusts to them, and the innings got to be managed, and maybe one of them gets hurt or whatever. But the upside for that group is tremendous. I mean, those guys have terrific stuff, and Bybee, especially the way he just showing on the major league stage right away is really impressive. And now you're adding, real, veteran poise and polish with McKenzie coming back healthy, and you have Bieber as of today, and it looks like they'll be reporting to camp with Shane Bieber, and that's not a bad thing for the state of the rotation. And maybe it'll look brilliant by year's end, where they kept Shane Bieber going into the year, and maybe they'll have success with him, or maybe he'll reestablish his trade value. Who knows what happens? But as of today, he's on the roster. So there's upside and there's experience in that core group of 5. You just got to keep it healthy.
So let's look at the lineup. We looked at the starting rotation. Here's kind of the projected lineup as it sits right now. And again, it's a lot of the guys that you saw at the end of last year. The concern becomes, how do you score runs? And what have you heard about Manzardo and the kind of player he can be? That's the guy that they got for Savale in that trade.
Yeah. Manzardo is really interesting, and you'll see him this year. I think there's no doubt about that. He's got pop in his bat. He's got bat to ball. He's a really intriguing prospect. People were very excited about his Arizona Fall League performance. Of course, it is Arizona. The ball flies, and the pitching crop this year in the Arizona Fall League was pretty suspect, but still, I mean, that's a guy that they targeted with the Savali trade, obviously, and he's going to get meaningful at bats for them this season. The lineup as a whole, the power is obviously very lacking. They were, I believe, second worst in slugging percentage in MLB last year. Their outfielders had, I think it was one of the 10 worst slugging percentage by an outfield in history, for a full season. And it doesn't project to be any better this coming year. I'll be curious to see how they handle DH, first base. Does Josh Naylor see some time in the outfield this year with Manzardo at first base? I mean, that could be a possibility to sort of upgrade the outfield in-house in a different way. And there's still things they could do in free agency. It hasn't happened yet, but there are still bats out there. Jorge Soler, Tommy Pham, as we sit here today, those guys are still out available in a slow-moving free agent class. But mostly, I think what you see is what you get, and you hope for some I talked about upside in the rotation. They're going to need upside from this lineup. They're going to need some guys who come out and establish themselves, and in some cases maybe surprise you, because on paper, this does not project to be one of the best lineups in MLB. Yeah. That I can tell you for sure. They will not be in my top 10 lineups.
All right. Before I let you go, new manager. So Terry Francona decides to step aside, is not managing this year, and who knows if he comes back and manages down the road. So I'm trying to get healthy, if you will. Stephen Vogt. It's kind of a tough spot for him. You're following one of the best managers in the history of the game, and you're stepping in with a young team that's very unproven.
Yeah, it's interesting on a lot of levels, because there is that dynamic of just comparing it with Francona. And even among, rookie skippers, he's an unusual breed where, we've seen plenty of former players become managers, but this guy played 2 years ago. That's pretty unusual. 1987 was the last time somebody, became a manager this soon after their playing career. It was Larry Boa with the Padres, after having finished his career in 1985. So that's the unusual nature of Vogt just, in MLB historically. And it's become more of a thing in baseball in the last decade or so, where you have these, guys who have never managed a game become managers. They've surrounded him with some bright minds, and but it's really he's going to be thrown into the fire here with a young team. And I mean, this is a situation, if you're going to have an inexperienced manager, I mean, this is the kind of club to have it with, is a young team, right? But he's going to have to find his footing along with many of his players.
Yeah, and the word on him is relates well to players, and I mean, that's a good thing. That, without question, that's a skill that you want. Correct? I mean, is that one of the better?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
one of the better skills to have.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think communication is the number one element of that managerial job. We all focus externally on, you made that bullpen move in the 7th inning. Yes, that stuff is important. You batted this guy, 5th instead of 6th. Yes, that stuff is important. But I think when you look at the context of a 162 game season, the communication within the clubhouse is vital. Have everybody on the same page, and everybody knows what their role is, and all those sorts of things. I mean, that's what matters. That's where Terry Francona was at his best, was just relating to his players, communication with players. And Stephen Vogt is cut from the same cloth. He doesn't have anywhere near the experience that Tito has. We know that. Few do. But he definitely has that working in his favor. And, he got raised last year working with the Mariners players. It was his first year in a coaching role. So he's stepping into some very big shoes, but he's got the personality for it. We know that right off the bat, where, he's going to be great at handling the media. That's another big element of the job. You're kind of like press secretary for your team, when you're the manager and dealing with us twice a day. But he's also very good with players.
Anthony Castrovince, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Anthony.
Absolutely, Dave. Thank you. Anthony
Castrovince, make sure you check him out. MLB's national baseball writer, telling us what the Guardians have going down in Arizona. They'll get going about a week from today. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.